This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Welcome back. I'd like to introduce Daniele Salerno from the University of Bologna. Daniele holds a PhD in semiotics from l'Istituto Italiano di Scienze Umane e Sociali e Scuola Normale Superiore di Pisa e Scuola Superiore di Studi Umanistici at University of Bologna. And he's a postdoctoral research fellow at University of Bologna, scientific secretary of the Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Cultural Memory and Trauma, and the founder member of Intergrace, which is the interdisciplinary research group on race and racism. In the last 10 years, he has followed two strands of research. One is the semiotics of security discourse and discursive construction of borders after 9/11. And the second is the semiotic life of historical events. That is, the strand deals with the meaning-making dynamics of the historical events and of its transformation over time to different media discursive genres. And today Daniele is gonna talk about the construction of the figure of the victim of terrorism and political violence in the Italian television. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. I have to cut my presentation on the internet, first of all. First of all, I want to thank Irene because, when I come here, I feel a little bit of home, actually, because in 2007 and 2008, I spent a period of research here. And that period, actually, it's still inspiring for me because the MA in cultural memory that was on at that time, there was a very lively atmosphere with students and scholars, and we had a lot of readings, a lot of discussions, and they are still here in this paper. So it's a pleasure to be here. Always. What I would like to do is to focus on one word of the title of this seminar, that is victim. And I will present to you here my perspective on this question on victim. Please check check the time because I can talk a lot. So my perspective that is a semiotic perspective and a critical perspective. Critical in which sense? Critical a little bit in the sense that Daniele Giglioli uses in Critica della Vittima, that unfortunately is not translated into English. So what I would like to do is to analyze victimary narrations in order to understand the traps that sometimes victimary narrations can hide against them. I have to confess, I'll open my presentation, that is this one. I have to confess that I have chosen a very easy target. No, it's not this one. Okay. A very easy target that is a TV series, a Rai TV series, Gli Anni Spezzati, which uses the victimary narration in order to rewrite the national history through the representation of a very conservative reinstallation of the paternal authority. This morning, you talked about adolescence and a little bit this topic enters also in this TV series. And I anticipate my hypothesis on the TV series What I would like to do is this, to analyze the ideological function of victimary narrations and how these narrations can be used in order to rewrite history. And the second point is this case study, Gianni Spezzali. And my hypothesis is this: the attack on the fathers in the series is narrated as the attack on fatherhood from young people, women and blue collars. And such an attack is described as the cause of the broken years, the 70s, a period of violence and social turmoil. The result of the victimary representation of the father is that feminist, labor and student movements are blamed for having caused the violence and the political and social turmoil that marked the 70s, because they attacked the political and social order. So the construction of the father as victim in this TV series is pivotal to the construction of the return of the father as the return of hope and prosperity. So this is the hypothesis. I hope that I will arrive to discuss this in details. But before analyzing Gianni Spezzati, I would like to do a very brief detour with the question, dealing with the question of victimhood at large, and by explaining my perspective, so a semiotic perspective and a critical perspective. So what we talk about when we talk about victims, at least in semiotics. As a semiotician, I'm mainly interested in analyzing cultural imaginaries and forms of representation. So I take here the victim as what in semiotics we call a thematic role. That is a set of attributes and behaviors that define a narrative actor, a narrative character. The victim as a thematic role is only one among other thematic roles, a narrative template that can be used to embody the life of someone. That could be a historical figure, or that could be a normal person, an everyday person. In other terms, the thematic role of the victim is only one of the possible roles that can be used to narrate the life of someone. Let's take an example, Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, that were two magistrates that were killed by mafia in the 90s. The lives of Falcone and Borsellino are narrated as life of victims in some commemorative and social contexts. For example, on the 21st of March, when mafia victims are remembered, or as lives of heroes in other contexts, in other commemorative contexts, in other texts. So we have two narrative templates that can be used, two roles that can be used for plotting the lives of Falcone and Borsellino, and these roles can be conflicting, can coexist, can evolve, and can transform during the decades. On this topic, there is a very interesting book by Barry Schwartz that is Abraham Lincoln and the Post-Heroic Era, where Schwartz traces he studies in particular Abraham Lincoln, but he traces the transition from a heroic era to a post-heroic era, very centered on victims. And according to Schwartz, we live in a post-heroic era. So Schwartz shows how the life of Abraham Lincoln has been differently narrated along the decades, and he highlights how Lincoln's life changed. Lincoln's life, the historical figure, is always the same, but the way his life is narrated changes in order to fit these new narrative templates. I want to stress that the problem here that we are living in a period where the figure of the victim is pivotal, is central, but in the past the figure of the hero was more important. So Schwartz and many scholars say the victim is the hero of our time, and while in the past we used to build monuments to commemorate heroes, now we build monuments to commemorate victims. And maybe memory studies in general have been polarized by the dichotomy hero versus victim. And this happens because memory studies have been focused in particular on violence and war. So on the one hand we have heroes, in particular those who struggle in the nation building era in the 19th century, the founding fathers, the warriors, in Italy, for example, Garibaldi. On the other hand, we have victims, and this is a 20th century story and history, very connected with the trauma discourse. Roger Tlachast, in a book, The Trauma Question, reconstructs this point very well. And such a transition comes mainly from two elements. Firstly, the category of shell shock after World War I for narrating the life of veterans. So this category undermined the very figure of the war hero, and the foundational and epic myth of the return of the war hero, the Odyssey, Ulysses, morphed into the psychological and interiorized story of a veteran that is physically returned and yet in a perilous psychological journey still. And secondly, obviously, the Holocaust. And we know that the nationalist and patriarchal and sexist rhetoric of the hero had dramatic consequences in the past century. And for the same reason, we have maybe to question also the centrality of victimhood today and victimary narrations and its side effects. In other terms, the question is not about living in an era without heroes, but that nowadays the narrative role of victim is in a certain sense, and I stress a little bit, I go a little bit further, but is in a certain sense hegemonic. The pantheon of heroes is replaced by a sort of martyrology. It's very interesting that in the interview they defined Carlo Giuliani as martyr. So, and I think that Daniele Giglioli in Critica della Vittima summarized very well the question. In other terms, the problem of the victimary narration is the problem of political struggle for recognition. Now, I have listened for the first time the interview made by Irene, but it's just perfect in the reflection that I want to do here, because it's like we in the interview. I read the interview as a search for a model of political struggle. You have two models there. The model of the hero, they mentioned Caporetto, that was quite weird. They used the model of victims, so Carlo Giuliani as victim, as martyr, and actually the conspiracy theory that they were talking about is very linked to the victimary narrations. Daniele Giglioli talks about that in a page of this very thin book. where he says actually conspiracy theory, what they construct. They construct an imaginary attack on you, and and you can feel as a victim. And actually, what happens in the narrations of the years of light in Italy? Often, conspiracy theories have the result to construct Italy and Italian people in general as victims of a conspiracy from outside. For example, CIA or but there is, I think, a third model, and there is a book that is just out edited by Tamar Katri and Dana Redin. That is, the title is Cultural Memory of Nonviolent Struggles. And is the third imaginary is the imaginary of transnational movements. So movements that are not national-based and movements that are not violent, in which you can find a third model of political struggle that does not correspond with national heroism and does not correspond with victimhood. And in reading in Catherine's collection, you find examples from Gandhi to suffragette movement. But I can add LGBT movement, also other feminist movements that can offer examples of models of political struggles that is not sexist and nationalist terrorism and is not victims, the victimary model. Another thing that I think that the General Social Forum was the case, and I think that this model is still an imaginary on which we are working on. But I think that Occupy, the LGBT movement, and other historical experience from Gandhi on are part of that history, and we can find a place where, we can narrate the story of General Social Forum, of the people that protested there, not as victims of the state, but as warriors for social rights, for civil rights, etc. So I think that we have to be aware of this. So this is my perspective. What time is it? I
can see it. Fast.
Okay. Can I? Okay. So let's go to Gianni Spezzati. The Broken Years. It's composed by 3 chapters. Each made up by 2 hours long episodes. The first chapter is Il Commissario, is the story of the police officer Luigi Calabresi. The second chapter is Il Giudice, and is actually focused on 2 magistrates, Mario Sossi and Francesco Coco. And the quite peculiar third chapter is dedicated to L'Ingegnere, that is a fictional character whose name is Giorgio Venuti. And this series is sponsored by AITER, Associazione Italiana Vittime del Terrorismo, Italian Association Victims of Terrorism, and Italian Police Association. So, for those that are dosed into the very complicated Italian contemporary history, I have to summarize very briefly who Luigi Calabresi, Mario Sossi, and Francesco Coco are. Luigi Calabresi was a police officer born in Rome in 1937, and in 1967 he was sent to Milan in the so-called political office. And obviously in 1969 a bomb in the Banca Nazionale dell'Agricoltura in Piazza Fontana exploded, claiming the lives of 17 people and injuring other 88. The bomb is considered the beginning of the so-called years of lead. The Piazza Fontana bombing is called La Madre di tutte le stragi, the mother of all massacres. And the bomb was put by a neo-fascist organization, Ordine Nuovo. However, at the very beginning, the anarchists were blamed, were accused of the massacre. And among them, Giuseppe Pinelli, that fell, it's complicated, but from the window of Calabresi's office in a very controversial circumstances. Calabresi was murdered with, was charged with murder with other colleagues, and the police officer was considered by left-wing movements as the responsible for Pinelli's death. And in 1972, Calabresi was shot dead. For this, who is familiar with very recent Italian history, Adriano Sofri was condemned. Calabresi is maybe the most controversial figure of those years. You have to consider that for the Catholic Church he is a servant of God, and now is ongoing. There is a process of canonization for recognizing him as blessed. That is a step under the sense. But from on the other side, yes, he epitomizes the state violence of the 70s, and actually his story is told by his son, that is, to my opinion, a very good journalist, Mario Calabresi. So it's a very interesting historical figure. Mario Sossi is a former magistrate, is still alive, and his case is peculiar also because he was a magistrate, but he was also MP candidate for Forza Nuova, so it's a figure very controversial. He was the magistrate, Pubblico Ministero in Genoa, of the trial against the terrorist organization Brigata 22 Ottobre, whose members were condemned for the murder of Alessandro Flores. He was Alessandro Flores, and this is an iconic image of those years. And for this reason, Mario Sossi succeeded in putting in jail the Brigata 22 terrorists, and for this reason the Brigate Rosse kidnapped him and asked him for the liberation of Brigate 22 members. Francesco Goggo was the chief of the Genoa court in the same period, and was the master actually of Sossi. He refused to free the terrorists of Brigata 22 Ottobre for liberating Sossi. It's a little bit Moro's dynamics some years later, so il partito della trattativa, il partito. And Goggo succeeded in keeping the terrorists in prison, and for this reason was killed. He was killed in 1976 by Brigate Rosse. So the broken years in question are those between 1969, so Piazza Fontana, and 1980. The event that closes the series, La Marcia dei 40.000, that was a march that took place in Turin in October 1980. It was a demonstration of 40,000 Fiat white collars against the picketing organized by Fiat blue collars, and that actually marked a defeat of Italian trade unions and of the Italian labor movement in general. So the series traces a narrative arc. The 50s and 60s are described as a golden era that is broken by violence. The 70s are thus represented as the decade of unhappiness and suffering that ends, according to the narration, with the Marcia dei 40.000. The historical arc that goes from Piazza Fontana to La Marcia dei 40.000 overlaps with the process in which the narrators, on behalf of the audience, look for and mourn for the loss of paternal authority. Such authority is in fact found and lost in Calabresi Sossi and Coco, and is re-established at the end of the series through the fictional character of Giorgio Venuti, marking an ending of a disorder and suffering era. The re-establishment of the father figure role means the return of order and hope, the closure of a season of violence that was opened by Piazza Fontana. Can I show some extracts?
Sono nato a Roma il 2 giugno del 1946. Sì, proprio come la Repubblica Italiana. Siamo cresciuti insieme. Era il dopoguerra e non c'erano soldi. Ma quando sei così giovane pensi solo a tutto ciò che potrà arrivare in futuro. E per un po' sono arrivate tante cose importanti. C'era da lavorare. C'erano le case popolari come quella dove sono cresciuto io. C'erano le vacanze al mare, la musica straniera. E come in tutte le case, anche nella nostra un giorno arrivò la lavatrice, il frigorifero, la televisione e pure il telefono. Insomma, non ce la passavamo. Ma quando mi sono ritrovato grande tutto è cominciato a cambiare. E pensato qualcosa, non so perché. Hanno cominciato a parlare di crisi, di questa cosa che non ho mai capito bene, la congiuntura. E poi la disoccupazione, gli scontri, la violenza. Ad un certo punto sono arrivate anche le cose.
So I show every chapter is about a narrator. Here is the young man, yes, Claudio Boccia for il commissario, and the second chapter is Roberto Nigro, that is a young magistrate, and every chapter constructs a sort of couple. So a narrator that is a sort of son, and who the person that is narrated, so Luigi Calabresi and Mario Sossi and Francesco Coco, that are elected father. And I show you now very briefly how this is. These are the funeral of Calabresi. So, and actually there is an interesting strategies, the intercutting of fictional images and archival images. These are the true funeral, and I will show you now how this is Mario Sossi, so the second shot.
Sossi aveva solo 10 anni più di me, eppure era come mio padre. Almeno quanto per lui lo era Francesco Coco, sin dai tempi in cui era capo della Porta del Gelo.
Anche lei, dottor Nico, vai. I miei complimenti per stamattina. Solo lavoro? No, non è solo lavoro. È di più. È uno di quei casi rari dove riusciamo a fare giustizia. Questo è il tuo momento. Non ho più niente da insegnarti. Vuol dire che mi devi fare l'avvocato. Grazie alle tue figlie devono essere fiere di te.
This is very important. There is the same dynamics for Calabresi, so they are also biological fathers. So there is also this transition, and here also Francesco Coppo is constructed as father of the other one. I want to actually to conclude very briefly because I don't want to steal the time. So what happens? There is an interesting way of intercutting archival images and also fake home movies in the series. Actually, the father gaze is implied in the home movies, and Giorgio Venuti is used a lot his camera to record the story of his family, and there is always an intercut between home movies in the third chapter and archival images, so that the historical gaze, history, and the father gaze just merge at the end of the series. And what happens is this. This is an image of the beginning of the series, so the first episode. And this is about the disorder caused by young people, women, during the 60s. What happens at the end? At the end happens that we have just men, fathers, that are, I cannot show you this, but if you want to suffer for some reason and watching it, you can, not here, I think, because there are websites, I think, outside the but anyway, so at the end, these guys are replaced by fathers and men that go back to history, and they claim back their role, and after that the future can be the 80s, hope and prosperity and the future. And so summarizing, my point was here you have a case of use of the victimary narration for rewriting history, actually by evacuating totally women and young people, student movements, and blue collars movements, and declaring actually the victory of the fathers, and the return of the fathers as the man in his 40s, 50s, establishing the authority. So this was my contribution to a critical perspective for